Thank you for listening to the ThePPod from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. Please note, due to the nature of this podcast, themes relating to the abuse and neglect of children are discussed, with the content being designed for an adult audience for educational purposes in order to protect children from harm. Therefore, listener discretion is advised and the content unsuitable for children.
Welcome to the ThePPod.
Right then, welcome back to the ThePPod, the partnership podcast from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. Now, today, what we're going to be doing is picking up on one of our recent two-part episodes where we spoke to a number of colleagues, as well as the Fathered Institute, about the importance of engaging with fathers. So what we wanted to do today is sort of pick up on that and talk about some of the work that's actually taking place around engaging with fathers. And I'm really pleased to have joining me today, Dr. Jo Nicholl. Jo, you've been with us before, one of our early ThePPod episodes, but if people haven't listened to that, would you be able to just introduce yourself and what your role is?
Hi, Steve. As you said, my name's Dr. Jo Nicholl. I'm the designated doctor for safeguarding children at NHS Somerset, which is a strategic role supporting the health system and our safeguarding partners with safeguarding of children. And I also work as a GP in a local surgery.
Thanks for joining us back here again. It's really good to hear from you. And I know from talking to you, we were really keen to build on our last episode because you've been doing quite a lot of work in this area for the last year and a half or so. And that's picking up on not just a lot of local learning in terms of reviews we've had and learning we've had around non-accidental injuries to very young children, but also on the back of some of the national reviews, as we talked about with Jeremy in our previous episode, things like the myth of invisible men, but also picking up on some of that sort of wider national data that we have about engaging with fathers. So I know you've been very busy around that. Would you be able to just kind of explain what you've been doing, the work you've been doing around sort of engaging with fathers, particularly within health systems and why?
Yeah, so as you said, there's been quite a lot of reviews that have highlighted the need to support and engage fathers more effectively around their parenting role, particularly in the pre-birth and immediately post-birth period. So when you've got very young children who we know are particularly vulnerable. So that's been highlighted, as you said, by the national review, the myth of invisible men. But we've also, unfortunately, had some reviews locally that have highlighted the involvement of fathers when children have come to harm. So I've always been very aware that we aren't great at supporting new dads in our systems. We don't commission services to specifically support new fathers in the way that we quite appropriately commission support for new mums. And I'm very much of a mind that safeguarding should be proactive as well as reactive. You know, that the quote from Desmond Tutu always springs to mind is that we should keep pulling people out the river and work out why they fell in the first place. And I think that's absolutely pertinent in this particular topic. You know, why is it that sadly men are more likely to cause harm to young children than women? And the answer to that is in part because they have unmet needs, they have lack of support, they struggle with the demands of a new baby, and you know, if they have mental health problems, drug and alcohol issues, ADHD, have experience of being, you know, poor parenting themselves as children, you add those difficulties and then the complexities of a new baby, and sometimes the lid blows off and things happen that shouldn't. I'm sure that the vast majority of people that harm young children never ever meant to do that, but they do because they lack support. They don't know what they're doing. They reached crisis point. And what we're trying to do with this project is trying to get in early and identify some of the vulnerabilities that people might have that will make being a parent more tricky and give them the support they need to deal with that. But also to say, you know, what help do you want as a new father? What are your aspirations? What are your worries? And very much be led by them as to how we can support them. So it's based on a very much a sort of motivational interviewing technique rather than a medical model. And that help might be things like housing, financial help, social issues, as well as medical issues. So it's looking at the problem in a very wide-ranging scenario, just to get in there and provide that support and advice and help and the links at an early stage, so that ultimately families thrive and everybody gets on and is happy and well and safe, which is what we want for everybody, really, isn't it?
And it's picking up on that thing that we've talked about in previous episodes about actually recognizing the important role that fathers play and the need to support that. And often within those sort of traditional system setups, we very much focus on mum and baby, which is absolutely great. But don't tend to think about dad and the impact of dad. And I know that we've talked before, and we talked in the previous episode, that often it's seen as a bit of wouldn't it be nice if we were able to do this? But actually it's really, really important that we do. I'm just wondering, have you got any sort of any kind of statistics or any details around the impact that it can have if you have a dad that's supported?
Well, I mean, I think there's some really good evidence out there now, and the Fatherhood Institute has really helped support that drive for evidence in this field. But we know that if dads are bonded well with their child and getting on effectively in the family, that actually their mental health is better, their physical health is better, they're happier, they live longer. But also, mum is better. There's less postnatal depression, they're less likely to smoke, they're more likely to breastfeed, and the child does better. Children who have a good bond with their father are more likely to do better in school, academically, socially. They have better ability to form relationships with other children and also with other adults later on in life, and they thrive. So actually, there's good evidence that it benefits everybody in the family if everyone's working together and mum and dad are both happy and engaged. So it's so important that we don't cut out 50% of the parenting and just ignore that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm just wondering, what sort of led you to set this up in the first place? What was that sort of moment you thought, do you know what, we've got to do something about this?
So I think it really came from a series of reviews that we had in Somerset, where it was clear that the father, who had sadly caused some harm to their child, was struggling with mental health problems. They'd had, poor childhood themselves, lots of adverse childhood events, been exposed to domestic abuse. They were struggling with drug and alcohol use, and they were very much seen as the ogre by professionals in the system. People were wary of them, not engaging with them, and these children came to harm not really because their fathers got up in the morning thinking, I'm going to do something awful to my child, but probably because the lid blew off and they did something that they then spend the rest of their life regretting. And I think, wouldn't it have been great if we could have just reached out and provided them with some support and guidance and help and addressed some of their struggles at a much earlier stage, perhaps when their partner was pregnant or when their baby was very young. I've often thought, as a result of those reviews, that we kind of need a bit of a postnatal check for men in the same way we have for women, but not obviously focusing on different things, because the father hasn't given birth, but they don't need the physical health checks in quite the same way. But we do need to make sure their physical health is good, but also their mental health, their mental well-being, their social support, and all the, a much wider remit. And having thought about it, I thought, well, actually, we don't need a GP to be doing this, because that's expensive, time-consuming, adding more appointments to an already really pressurized system. This feels like something that would be ideal for a health coach to manage. And the health coaches in Somerset come from a very diverse range of background. They have lots of different skills, but really their remit is to support patients in terms of accessing and dealing with whatever they want help with. So they very much use motivational interviewing, signposting, guidance, and they kind of get people in the system with the right person. And that feels like the right place to start a conversation with men about, what are you struggling with? What are you worried about? What do you think might help you to be a good father? What do you want help with? Okay, let's, introduce you to my colleague who can help with that. Let's signpost you to this particular thing. Let's give you this bit of information. Let's provide you with some ongoing support. And then I think that's likely to be a much more effective way of engaging them.
Like you say, this is very much about working in partnership across the partnership agencies, but particularly within health services. So what does this kind of look like for a dad on a kind of practical basis? I'm a new dad. what we're kind of looking to achieve here? I mean, in terms of those sort of routes, would that be through the GP, or and does it sort of, how would that sort of link in?
What I'd ultimately like this to be is a universal service that's offered to every new dad. But we did a pilot project in Bridgewater at the start of this idea, and we found that men weren't engaging with it as we'd hoped they were. So there was a lot of learning that came from that experience. And because of that, we've slightly altered the trajectory of the project to focus more on men who we know are struggling a bit now, with the aim that ultimately we will make it a universal service one day. So the way we've set up the project is that men can be referred in for a health coach conversation by anybody in the system or by themselves. So it could be a social worker who's working with the family. It could be a health visitor who's providing some additional support for a family that's struggling a little bit. It could be a school teacher who's aware that, a new parent has already got some additional vulnerabilities. It could be the GP, anybody in the system, or the dad could just contact themselves and say, I just want to talk to somebody because I'm worried about something. So in that respect, it is a universal service because anybody can do that. But from the professional's point of view, they will focus on the families who they feel could do with a bit of additional support. And then when they referred in, the practices are taking slightly different approaches to doing this. So many practices will offer one-to-one conversations with a health coach, and they will set that up and then arrange to meet, go from there. And those meetings could be face-to-face. They could be a phone call or a Teams call if that suits the dad better. And, there may be some opportunities to use some of the out-of-hours services like the Saturday morning clinics and things to do that as well. And some practices are looking at perhaps providing a more group approach to this support initially, to get some of these men together to support each other and have a bit of peer support, as well as the guidance from the health coach. So there isn't really a one-size-fits-all, but I think the message is that anybody who wants support should be able to access it. Not all practices have signed up and done the training, but we have quite a few that have, and I'm hoping that we build on that. The system we have at the moment as it exists should also be able to provide that support to men, but this is just giving people additional skills to think about how they might help better. And that's the bit that we want to roll out, really.
And like you say, there is support out there available anyway, but there's no harm, and it's quite important sometimes to actually spotlight something to say, look, we've got to do something proactively about this. So you talked about the pilot project that you ran in the Bridgewater area to start off with, and like you say, sort of had fairly limited results from that. You said, like you say, there is a lot of learning that did come from running that as a pilot project. And then coming out from that, I know we've had conversations about sort of some of that learning, and now it's being expanded out across the county. And I know you've been doing some work with SAS, which is the Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership, alongside this, which we'll talk about in a minute if that's okay. But in terms of kind of expanding this out across the county, what's that look like? What work have you been doing to kind of embed that project wider?
So we've developed a training package which is aimed at health coaches, but really anyone who's interested can come along. And is a sort of 2-hour session, and we've run that several times across in various sites across the county and online to try and make it as accessible as possible. And in that, we talk about why we're doing this project, where it's come from, like we've already said, the benefits to families in doing that, the challenges and barriers about men accessing healthcare and how we might overcome that, some of the training requirements that might be helpful to add to their toolkit, particularly things like an increased awareness of domestic abuse, for example, giving them some tools around things like ICON, which is the program about coping with crying to avoid babies being shaken, safe sleep, and particularly a thing about bonding, because some men feel a bit anxious about whether they're bonded with their child, and some simple things like reading with your child, singing to them, playing with them, and the serve and return aspect of bonding that really helps. And I have to say, when we've done those sessions, there's been a real buzz in the room and lots of people coming up themselves with really good ideas. We've had about 40 people attend the training now, which has been mainly health coaches, but also a mix of Connect Somerset and health visitors as well. We've got about 40% of GP practices have got somebody trained up, and 10 of the 12 PCNs across Somerset have somebody in the PCN that's been trained up. So considering we're in a winter time with a lot of pressure on primary care, I'm quite pleased that we've had that impact already, and we'll continue to offer that training to anybody that wants it. And one of the things I'm looking to do going forward is to look at areas where there's a high level of sort of male workforce. So things like the military base that we have down the road, to see whether their medical team would like to have training and expand it in that way. And then try and get the other 60% of GPs on board as well, GP practices. So that's where we're going with it, really.
I have to say, I agree with you. I've been involved in some of those training sessions, and when you said there's been a real buzz in the room, I agree. It's been really, I think it's been really inspiring, actually, listening to people and talking to health professionals and health coaches, and saying actually they recognise the need, and just by bringing it into the room to say, so let's do something about this, has been great. And I have to say, something that really sticks in my head from the workshops that we've run, sadly, I believe it was one of the health coaches who was just about to become a dad for the second time, and it was really, I don't know, it really sort of touched me talking to him during the workshop, because in a lot of respects he wasn't looking forward to the birth of the second child because of his negative experiences.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he's a health professional, and I thought that was a real shame to have that. But at the same time, you could see that within that, and it really brought it down to earth for me, for everybody, I think, within the room. But at the same time, it really brought home the importance of this. And I think there was inspiration within that room at that time to say, actually, yeah, we've got to crack this. We've got to do something about this.
Yeah, I think every single training session that we've done, they really got it as to what we're trying to do. And I absolutely, felt, you can feel the delegates feeling quite cross that this is going on still, and actually we've really got to change that. There was a real passion to do something by the end of the session, and they were coming up with good ideas themselves and adding to it. And as I say, reflecting on their own experiences. I think they've been really good sessions. And I think you and I have probably taken as much from them as the delegates have, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously we're in the sort of relatively early stages of this rollout across the county. And like I say, we've got 40% of GP practices signed up. What are the kind of next steps for this? Where are we going with this?
So I'd like to just give it a little bit of time to embed with the practices that have already signed up, and then seek some feedback from them as to how it's going, what sort of things they've been seeing, what things they've been recommending and supporting men with, and what are the gaps, what else do we need to do? Because it may be that we highlight, well, so many percentage of men came and said, actually, I really need some help with this, but this service doesn't exist. So maybe we need to then develop something more off the back of it. And I'd like to engage more practices and get more training. But I think that hopefully once we get some experience of how it's working and there's a bit more conversation about it, that will come. And there's been some interest in this nationally. I'm going to talk to the Fatherhood Institute at their Think Fathers webinar in a few weeks' time to share the learning from our pilot and what we're doing in Somerset, because it fits with a campaign that they're running. And, just keep pushing it and raising the agenda nationally, because I think one day it would be great if we actually had a universal service across the whole of the UK for dads that really supported them and engaged them and changed the rhetoric around how we talk to men about their children. That's a bit of a long way up.
Well, but it's got to start, hasn't it? It's got to start somewhere, and gain nothing, as we talked about in our previous episode with Jeremy and with other professionals locally. There is a change taking place. There is momentum gaining up, and we are at the start of this process, but things are changing very quickly, and there's a recognition that we've got to do something different. In fact, it was interesting you mentioned there about the work that you've been doing with the Fatherhood Institute, and like I say, it just by coincidence, it keys in, I think, beautifully with their recent campaign they've launched, Looking Out for Dad, which is absolutely in line with what what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Very much advocating for an NHS health check, covering both physical and mental health in the same way that we do currently with mums. And I think it's one of those things that putting those two together, saying, well, actually, there is this work taking place and there is this campaign taking place, and it just aligns perfectly there, I think. But so, and in terms of kind of your sort of aspirations for the project, I mean, where would you like to sort of see this go?
So I'd like to see every practice have people trained up to support fathers specifically, ultimately, and that we have a really robust system where other health professionals are aware of it and thinking about it and referring in, and also doing their own bit to support dads more effectively. And I'd like men to become more aware of the project and not feel it's to feel it's business as usual almost. I mean, the postnatal check for women is not compulsory, but it's very rare for women not to attend that appointment. It's almost 100% attendance rate. But getting men to engage in a similar thing has been much more challenging. But that's because it's something new and that they don't quite understand. And the more we talk about it and do it and reflect on it and feedback on it and talk about it some more, the more it'll feel like business is normal for dads. And then hopefully everyone will start to come forward and ask for that support. And it'll be something, I'm about to have a baby, right? I'm going to go and have that conversation. Or I've just had a baby and I'm going to have that conversation, whichever way round they want it. I think it does need to be flexible, not a one size fits all, but we make, we adapt it to whatever the dad's needs are. And it may be that for some dads, ongoing links with a health coach and working with them is going to be helpful. I think, one of the good things about the health coaches is they've got a little bit more time than the GP, so they can actually spend half an hour talking to somebody as opposed to a 10-minute conversation that GP's probably already running late and is a bit stressed anyway. So they can really give dads that time, and I think that's so valuable. So I hope that everyone in the system, including the dads themselves, will start to recognise the value of this and then use it.
And I know, like we mentioned earlier, part of this and the health coach side of things has been working in partnership with SASP, Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership. What sort of role are they playing in the project?
So SASP have they supported me with a pilot. They were really good with that. We ran that with one of the health coaches, Sammy, and Sammy was actually doing the day-to-day project, and we had support with the management of it from the management team at SASP and the finances of the project and things like that. So they've been really involved, and it really aligns with SASP's kind of ethical view of supporting patients in a much more wide, holistic sense about their well-being, and using things like sport and exercise to help with well-being. And several of the men had a warm handshake into the Unbreakable Men project that SASP also ran, which is about supporting men with mental health difficulties through sport and exercise rather than sitting across a desk having a conversation. And that really absolutely aligns with what we're trying to do in this project.
My name's Sammy, and I'm a senior health coach working with the Bridgewater Bay PCN. I'm actually employed by a company called SASP, which are an organisation that champion movement and activity as medicine for helping us to improve our lifestyle in various ways. I also head up a project called Unbreakable Men, which, as the name suggests, is focused around men and their mental health, which is a great little program I enjoy being a part of. Which is why Joe actually asked me to come on this project looking at new dads, because we see a lot of new dads through our organisation. So my role as a health coach, we see a lot of one-to-one time in clinics or in health and wellbeing hubs. So we thought, let's use that setting and apply this new dads project to that setting. So a lot of the dads that I've been seeing have been people that are living with different difficulties. So the setting that I'm working out of 90% of the time is out of health and wellbeing hubs or GP surgeries in a one-to-one setting, just helping different people from different backgrounds with various aspects of their lifestyle. So Joe thought that this was a great opportunity to speak to new dads because they're already on the GP's radar. So we thought this would be a fantastic way to find these new dads that we're trying to target with this project. The midwives would make referrals to myself for this project. I would then call these dads and find out if they wanted a one-to-one appointment, and then we'd speak about how they found being a dad. Was it what they expected? Is there any areas of concern they have? Because there's a lot of focus on mothers, as is appropriate when a new baby comes along, and dads often feel like they're a little bit left out or a little bit forgotten about. And we know that, as Joe has said, that dads are very key or a very prominent part of a child's early life in this day and age. So we wanted to make sure that those dads are getting the support they need in order to be the best dad that they want, that they can be. So I've got a couple of standout stories I could speak to you about. One of which was a young man who was living with ADHD. He had all the typical vices that come along with that. He struggled with addictions and things like this. And he was worried that he was going to pass this on to his son. So for him, it was very practical support. It was a case of getting in touch with Turning Point, who are a local drug and alcohol service who can help people with addictions. And he's flown with that. He just needed somebody to give him support there. And I helped him get in touch with that organisation. The second case study I could speak to you about is actually another guy whose wife went through a bit of a traumatic birth, needed emergency C-section. And as you can imagine, for a dad who's been told to wait outside the room and allow this to happen, it was very traumatic for him, and he didn't feel like he had time to process his emotions, because not only was he having to now care for a newborn baby, he was also having to care for his wife, who suddenly couldn't move as much as she has been moving and needed that extra care. So he felt very much like he was he was thrust in at the deep end, I'll say that much. So for him, it was very emotional support. So two people that needed support in different ways. For me, what I'd like to see is this being a standard practice thing. With it being a new concept from a primary care perspective, I think we felt like we had to do a lot of legwork to get it into the consciousness of the people making the referrals. So I think what would be fantastic is that this is just standard practice to make sure that both parents cared for in the way that they need to be cared for. Obviously, the mother has to take priority along with the baby, but there is a third party in there, and I'm sure many dads around the county can agree that they have felt like they could do with some extra support. I'm about to become a first-time dad myself, so I know how much I'm looking for support.
It's not meant to be judging men in terms of their parenting or what their experiences or their issues. It's meant to be, what help can we give you to do whatever it is you need to do to be a good father? And it's really holding their hand and walking alongside them rather than saying, you've got to do that and you've got to do that. And I think hopefully once men start to use the service more effectively, they'll recognise that.
If anybody's sort of listening to this and their ears are pricking up, thinking this sounds great, how can I find out more about this? Or if we've got any GP practices or health colleagues looking to get involved with this, where can they find out more?
Yeah, so absolutely. If they contact me through the Somerset Safeguarding ICB main email, which is someicb.safeguardingandcla@nhs.net, and I think you're going to put a link to that.
I'll pop that in the text. It's quite a lengthy email.
Yeah, it's quite a lengthy one. But yeah, just drop us a line to that email, just saying, I'm interested in the New Dad Supporter Project, and we'll get back to you and see how we can help, because I'm, very happy to put on more training sessions and answer questions, etc. as they come through. I would love more requests for training.
Lovely. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming along today and talking about the project. And I'm really excited about it. I'm genuinely really excited about it. And I think it would be great, like you say, to be sort of part of this kind of moving this agenda forward. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is the aspiration is business as usual, and it's not something that we have to particularly highlight, not something we particularly have to talk about. It's just business as usual in the same way that we support other groups. So yeah, thank you so much. And also alongside that, really looking forward to some of the work we're sort of doing, like I say, moving forward with the Fatherhood Institute and other organisations and some of the national work around this, because I think it's definitely definitely time for a change.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for coming along. Great to speak to you again. And best of luck with everything moving forward.
As always, if you'd like to find out more details on the topics discussed in today's episode or are affected by any of the content discussed, please go to the SSCP website at somersetsafeguardingchildren.org.uk or by following any of the links in the description below. If you enjoy listening to the ThePPod, we'd really appreciate it if you took the time to follow or subscribe to us on your chosen platform and make sure that notifications are turned on. Or even better, leave us a review to let other people know about it, and make sure to let your colleagues know about this podcast and encourage them to join us here as well. It really does help to spread the word. If you have any questions or comments arising from today's episode or would like to be involved in future episodes, we'd love you to get in touch with us at theppod@somerset.gov.uk. Once again, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my guest today, Dr. Joe Nicholl, Designated Doctor for Safeguarding Children, and as always, I'd like to thank you for listening. My name is Steve Maccabee, and I'm the Training Manager for the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership, and I look forward to you joining us again next time at the ThePPod.
Let's work together to help keep children safe.